Yousaf, why is it that you're still so, use of a better word, not mine word, but someone else's word, still so toxic to the SNP?
Well, it depends who you're talking to in the SNP. I mean, that won't be the case. Let's put it this way. You've got two leadership candidates. That might be the case for one of them. It certainly is not the case for the other.
Hello, this is Never Mind The Ballots, the politics show that everyone's talking about, with me, Harry Dunn, and my team from The Sun. Joining me now, a man who has been First Minister, former First Minister Alex Salmond. Alex Salmond, welcome to Never Mind The Ballots.
Oh, great pleasure to be here. The must-go-on show.
Indeed, indeed. When you were First Minister, were you better at counting than Humza Yousaf was?
It's very strange. I mean, obviously I ran a minority government between 2007 and 2011, and then a majority government. And certainly, a majority government meant that you didn't have to do your arithmetic every day. But minority government had its own challenges. But it was actually, there was a lot of fun. Maybe it was more fun looking back than it was fun at the time. But interestingly enough, in terms of, the outside observers, as opposed to what perhaps I think, but outside observers say the period of minority government between 2007 and 2011 is the kind of best period of the entire Scottish Parliament over the 25 years. I mean, I thought the majority government was quite good as well, but that's what outside observers say.
Do you take any pleasure or joy in the collapse of your old party? Obviously, you left under a cloud in a bitter row with Nicola Sturgeon. How's it feeling now?
No, I left because I thought it was in the interest of the party. As soon as there was an investigation into me, as you know, Harry, and I know you want to say, of which I was cleared completely. But that doesn't seem to be the trend now. People have investigations into them and they just carry on regardless. I look at that. My heart is still very much attached to the SNP in many ways. I mean, I was a member of it for decades. I led it for 20 years. So, what hurts the SNP tends to hurt me as well. But obviously, you get very frustrated that the SNP over the last 10 years has completely lost its way on independence. And in the last few years, has lost its reputation for competence in government. Both of these things are grievous mistakes, in my view. I mean, competence in running the Scottish Parliament, in my mind, was always an essential ingredient for building the confidence of the Scottish people to move to independence.
Is your new vehicle, what's it really about? Is it about taking out the SNP old guard or keeping Alex Salmond on the Scottish stage? What's relevant? You're polling at what, 3%? It's not, the SNP refused to do a deal with you. Where does this leave your future?
Well, in a much stronger position, of course, Harry, because the big takeout, if we take out, the big parties of Hollywood, what's the takeout for the smaller parties? Well, it is that no sane SNP voter or representative could rely on the Greens anymore. I mean, the Greens have been pretending to be an independence party, but when matters come to the crunch, they quite openly say they would do a coalition with Labour, that independence is not a red line. And at the end of the day, whatever tantrum they were in over the last week, to actually talk about bringing down a nationalist First Minister by backing a Tory motion, it tells you a great deal that the Greens can never be trusted with independence votes. And that's why Alba will emerge with a very sensible platform as the winners in terms of the smaller parties in Holyrood. And we're looking at a situation where we reckon we can get about 15% in the list vote at the next Holyrood elections, which would give you 20 seats under the system we have.
Is that really realistic, 20 seats, do you reckon?
Well, I'll tell you, Harry, there was a poll, a Find Out Now poll, which asked about, who people preferred for leadership in the Holyrood Parliament. And Alba were 15% across Scotland and leading in the northeast of Scotland. The 15% gets you 20 seats. That's just how the arithmetic works. But, look, if you're an SNP voter who previously at the last election gave your second vote to the Greens on the list because you knew it would be wasted if you gave it to the SNP who'd already piled up the constituency votes, why on earth would you vote Green now when they're unreliable on Scottish independence and conspire to bring down an SNP First Minister. I mean, it's a straight calculation.
It's clear that your former SNP colleagues would rather find a way to work with the Greens in minority parliament than work with Alba and yourself. Why is it that you're still so, use of a better word, not mine word, but someone else's word, still so toxic to the SNP?
Well, it depends who you're talking to in the SNP. I mean, that won't be the case. Let's put it this way. You've got two leadership candidates. That might be the case for one of them. It certainly is not the case for the other. Right. Perhaps for the old guard in the SNP, it might be the case. It won't be for the new guard in the SNP. Clearly, it wasn't Humza Yousaf's inclination. Because why would he write to Ash Forbes, why would he write to Ash Regan, the leader of Alba in Scots Parliament, looking for a meeting if he wasn't prepared to do a deal?
Tell us about that 7:30.
Unfortunately for Humza, I think he got some phone calls, Harry.
Well, that's the thing,
listen,
because
Harry, you go with your question, then I'll go with my answer.
Who called who that morning? Did Ash call him, or which way round was it?
Well, he called Ash. There's no doubt about that at 7:30. But I mean, that doesn't really matter in a sense, Harry, does it? Because Humza wrote the letter to Ash Regan. There's no doubt about that. Humza wrote a letter to Ash Regan and the other party leaders saying, will you come in to Butte House for talks to see how we can resolve this situation? Ash Regan said, yes, of course I'll come in for talks. I mean, here's a revelation for you. We sent them what Ash Regan worked out, the series of issues that we were concerned about. We sent them into Butte House. Humza knew what they were, and he described them in that phone call on Monday morning to Ash Regan as entirely reasonable. And there were things that any SNP First Minister should be interested in, at least making independence a priority, moving away from the agenda of culture wars. And the precise issue there was to implement the cash report, where it's relevant to Scotland in full, which I know that Humza Yousaf would have wanted to do unhindered by the Greens. In fact, that was the issue which provoked the crisis, incidentally. And then thirdly, to transfer some of the budgetary items that the Greens have got locked away in what is a suicide deal with the Greens. It was an absolute suicide deal with things like active travel, renovation of buildings, hundreds of millions of pounds, and devote that money to things that really matter, like health, education, housing, jobs. And we saw just a glimpse of that, did we not, last Friday, when Humza Yousaf announced an 80 million housing development in Dundee, an investment in community housing, taking the money from the active travel budget, which was one of the hobby horses of the Greens. Now, I think active travel is a fantastic thing, Harry, incidentally. I like to be active and I like to travel, but it's not as important as putting roofs over people's heads. Housing's more important, as is health, as is education, as is jobs. And that just one day, when Humza was free of the shackles of the albatross around his neck of the Green Deal, maybe gave an indication of a different type of First Minister that Humza Yousaf could have been. Mr.
Salmond, we're running out of time, sadly. But the other issue that keeps popping up with the idea that Alba and the SNP could have done a deal was the fact that there were SNP MPs and MSPs openly criticising your position on Russia. Did you regret taking that show on Russia today? Do you regret staying on the channel so long?
Harry, you and I
can read you some quotes. Stuart MacDonald said...
look, that's not a serious issue, as you're well aware. I mean, Stuart MacDonald is not, how I'll put it, at the centre of decision-making of the Scottish National Party. And, some people think that Humza Yousaf's term in office is Stuart MacDonald's term in office is about to come to an end. So it's the people in the Scottish Parliament, the ones who have to face the arithmetic of the Scottish Parliament, who matter. Clearly, Humza was interested in getting the security of Ash Regan's vote. He wouldn't have written otherwise. Unfortunately, I suspect there were other forces in the SNP wouldn't allow him to go through with it.
Like
why on earth would you sack the Greens unless you were looking at the alternative arithmetic?
Who would you say was the forces working against you?
Well, given I don't know who phoned Humza, and I don't know that, so it's best just to describe them perhaps as the old guard. But then, of course, that's the choice that the SNP has, isn't it now? Whether to go on with what they've had, the continuity candidate in John Swinney, who has many admirable qualities, incidentally. He was my finance minister for many years, or to perhaps take a different tack across a range of issues, and the SNP members can decide. I hope there's a contest, incidentally, Harry. I mean, it would be the worst option of all for the SNP if they didn't have a contest and had a coronation instead, because then the person elected wouldn't even have a party mandate to claim, you know, when the inevitable brickbats are thrown at them, you don't have a mandate to be First Minister. At least if you've got a party mandate, you've got some protection from that argument.
Mr. Salmond, it feels to me you're a man that still feels aggrieved by how you were treated and how you left your old party. Do you not get the impression that some people say that, look, you were totally cleared by a jury? I completely understand that and do not dispute that in any way, but perhaps not yet cleared. Perhaps not yet cleared. Perhaps not yet cleared in the eyes of the Scottish public.
Well, the eyes of the Scottish public, that poll I cited had me as the preferred candidate for First Minister of the North East of Scotland, and in a close race for second all over Scotland in terms of the overall thing of the poll. But, you know, the Scottish public will judge people in terms of how they put forward their arguments. And a lot of people in Scotland want to see a return to emphasis on Scottish independence, which is what independence parties are meant to be doing. They want to see a move away from identity politics. They prefer self-determination to self-identification. And above all, they want to see a return of competence in government and the priorities that really matter to people: education, health, housing, and the rest of it. That's what I think people want to see. And if Alba keeps stressing these things, then they'll grow in public esteem and support.
Mr. Salmond, thank you very much for joining us on Never Mind The Ballots. Come again and see us soon. Keep us updated on how that goes. And
will do, Harry. I've got it marked in my diary. No problem.
See you soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Now, to chew that all over and read the runes up north, the Scottish Sun's political guru, Chris Musson. Chris, welcome to Never Mind The Ballots, your debut. Interesting times up there. We've got a First Minister possibly could be the first SNP First Minister not to get nicked post office so far. Is that the Yousaf legacy?
Indeed. Well, you know, there's time. I'm not suggesting in any way that Yousaf's done anything wrong, of course. Yeah, Humza's legacy. Well, I mean, he's struggled from day one. I wrote a piece about a year ago saying that he didn't so much have a mountain to climb as a cliff, and he got halfway up that, if we're generous, and he's just let himself go. He was dealt a duff hand from day one, was Humza. You know, not least with the legacy of Sturgeon and her policies kind of tagging, and then of course Operation Branchform, the police probe, which has led to the sort of SNP imploding further. So he's been trying to get a foothold over this last year, but really struggling. And then his mishandling of ending the Greens coalition, which was a right decision, but it was the way he went about it was catastrophic. And now we're in a position where
any white smoke from that police investigation? It feels like it's been going on for years now.
Yeah, it has been going on for years, and we had a development a couple of weeks ago with the arrest and charge of Peter Murrell, Nicola Sturgeon's husband. But Nicola Sturgeon herself is still under investigation, as is Colin Beattie, the former SNP treasurer, who's also an MSP. So in short, we don't know what is going on there behind the scenes, but it's still rumbling on.
Exactly. Well, listen, Chris, we'll leave it there. Keep us posted in what is going to be another mad year in British politics. But lovely to see you. Love your new office.
Cheers, Harry.
See you later.
Thanks.